Doug Gottlieb in for Colin. This is The Herd. What happened last night in the bubble? Like, there are some amazing things that can happen when there's trades in the NBA. When you trade Chris Paul, a first ballot Hall of Fame point guard who has been at the center of numerous stories. Like, Chris Paul's actually lived several different interesting lives, right? Like, for the college basketball fan, he played for the late, great Skip Prosser. Rest in peace to Skip. Lost in an unbelievable game in the second round to West Virginia. Remember that? Kevin Pittsnoggle? He got Pittsnoggled in the tournament. Then Chris Paul was playing for the New Orleans Hornets, and they had Hurricane Katrina, and so then they moved to Oklahoma City for 2 years. Do you guys remember any of this? Then he was supposed to be traded to the LA Lakers, only that's because at the time, the league was operating and owning the then New Orleans Hornets, and David Stern's like, nah, that ain't a fair trade. We ain't doing that. He was this close to playing with Kobe Bryant. How many titles would Kobe Bryant? How would we look at Chris Paul had he played with the Lakers back in his actual prime? Then he went to the Clippers, and they had that kind of dysfunctional mess of a Lob City, DeAndre Jordan, Blake Griffin. Remember, they had JJ Redick, Donald Sterling. Like, all of this stuff was going on. You had Donald Sterling getting exposed for who he really was or is. You also had the injuries in the playoffs, the dysfunction in the playoffs. Never made it past the second round. It was seen as the Clipper curse. The Clipper curse actually wasn't about that. It was about first-round picks getting hurt or just being a bust. Anyway, then there was the DeAndre Jordan. Remember, DeAndre Jordan left to go sign with the Mavericks, and then they went and got him to change his mind. They sat down, right? Do you remember all this stuff? This is all one guy. Then he gets traded to Houston, and they basically trade everything in the kitchen sink except James Harden for Chris Paul, and it comes close to working. Only 1 year Chris Paul gets hurt. 1 year they miss 27 consecutive three-pointers. Then he gets traded to Oklahoma City, back to where he had played for Russell Westbrook, who had won an MVP and is the first player since Oscar Robertson to average a triple-double. Did it 3 consecutive years. Remember, he had that massive deal with Houston. Part of it is he's the president of the NBAPA. There's a lot of other stuff with Chris Paul. But because Chris Paul has never even been to an NBA Finals or won an NBA championship, he right now is on the list and likely to remain on the list of guys who were great players, but not champions, right? And what it takes to be a champion is you got to be a winner. Look, he had that squad he had that great squad with the Clippers. We so often forget that 1 year he got hurt, 1 year Blake Griffin got hurt. That the truth is, as much as I hold JJ Redick in high regards and considering he's still playing, he's still getting buckets, he's still a viable NBA player, really hard for him to be your starting two guard and win an NBA championship. Right? That's just the reality of it. The reality is, normally the best player on the other team plays the position that he plays, and he's not a particularly good or effective defensive player at all, and he can be marginalized offensively at times just being a shooter. But I could make these explanations for why Chris Paul hasn't won a championship. I would also point out, if you go back to his days with the Hornets early on, Peja Stojakovic on his team, as well as a couple others, he was great in the playoffs then. He had great moments in the playoffs for the Clippers. He had some big moments in the playoffs for the Rockets. And last night, he absolutely took over the game. The juxtaposition of Russell Westbrook, who not only had 7 turnovers, but some of the turnovers that no one's even near the guy that he's passing to, and he throws it out of bounds. Shoots an air ball in a tie game. Doesn't get the ball to James Harden when they're down 2 and a chance to come down and win it. Whereas Chris Paul seemingly in on every defensive play, every important rebound, making every big shot. Houston was up 98-92. They're up 3-2 in the series to an Oklahoma City team, which everyone thought was tanking at the start of the year. You got Lou Dort, who's Canadian. He one and done from Arizona State, can't shoot, but competes. Chris Paul was brought in on that team for 2 reasons. One, to train Shai Gilgeous-Alexander to be a star point guard, and 2, to ultimately become trade bait and move on at some point in the middle of the season. Chris Paul hit 2 threes, grabbed 2 steals, hit 2 free throws, had 2 big rebounds. Oklahoma City ends Game 6 on a 12-2 run. They force Game 7, and Russell Westbrook is, when I say the GOAT, it's not the greatest of all time. It's the actual meaning usually of GOAT in sports, which is he's the one who screwed it up. It was amazing. And look, part of this is I was a point guard in college. I played professional basketball. I never made the NBA. But if I could play like one guy, if I envisioned how I would dream of playing ultimately in the NBA, right? Like I grew up idolizing Stockton. I love Nash. But if I could play like one guy, Chris Paul's the guy. Chris Paul's the guy. And look, I know some of you don't like his persona, and we'll get to that later on in the show. I will tell you that when you're a 6-foot point guard, who's been told, either you're not big enough or not good enough or you're not a winner, in order to make it, you almost have to be a mean SOB. You just do. But we do this thing in sports where we act like there's more pressure when you get to an NBA championship. Like, if you can overcome the challenges in the first and the second round, somehow you can't overcome those same challenges. Like, you're a choker when you get to a high. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. There's so many different things that go into winning. So, can we put to bed the idea that you have to win a championship in order to be a winner? You're going to miss shots in big instances. You're not always going to play perfect. But I would commit to you that Chris Paul, with the ball in his hands and the game on the line, I have a supreme amount of confidence that he's going to take and make the big shot or take and make the big play. I believe that last night he solidified himself, not just because he's done it once, he's done it multiple times in multiple stops for different teams and different coaches. He's a winner. He just may not, he's not going to win a championship in Oklahoma City. Doesn't have a team do it. You can be a winner and not always win. You can be a losing player and sometimes win. Confusing? Sure. But sometimes that's our job, I believe, is not just to make bombastic statements and point out things that you may have missed, but also to give you context. And the context is they were dead to rights beaten with a young team, no real other options, and he just decided, F it, I'm going to win this by myself. And you know what? He did. He did. What a game. What a night. If you love hoop, you were sitting there going, this is amazing. This is amazing. And it also points out, look, I respect stat guy. I'm not going to disrespect guys that follow the stats. But the idea that Russell Westbrook, who averaged as many or more assists than Chris Paul, is in the stratosphere of Chris Paul as a passer is a joke. Is a joke. But that takes actually watching the games, understanding the nuance of the sport. And sometimes there's just too many things on, and we go and look at the box score and make an assessment as to who can do what and who can't do what. And we do the same thing about winners and losers. Well, his team, Clippers never got out of the second round, so Chris Paul's not a winner. That's not really close to being accurate.